President, dear distinguished Senate President, submission of the revised 2022 fiscal framework. As we are aware, there have been new developments both in the global economy as well as in the domestic economy, which have necessitated the revision of the 2022 fiscal framework on which the 2022 budget was based. These developments include spikes in the market price of crude oil, aggravated by the Russian-Ukraine war, significantly lower oil production volume due principally to production shut-ins as a result of massive theft of crude oil between the production platforms and the terminals. The decision to suspend the removal of petroleum motor spirit PMS subsidy at a time when high crude oil prices have elevated the subsidy cost provisions for the recent enhancement have elevated the subsidy cost has significantly eroded government revenues. I'll take that again. The decision to suspend the removal of petroleum motor spirit PMS subsidy at a time when high crude oil prices have elevated the subsidy cost has significantly eroded government revenues. There is also the need to make adequate provisions for the recent enhancements of allowances for officers and men of the Nigeria Police Force to boost their morale as they grapple with heightened security challenges in the country. Following these developments, it has become necessary to adjust the fiscal framework and accordingly amend the 2022 Appropriation Act to ensure its successful implementation. The adjustments to the 2022 fiscal framework include A, an increase in the oil price benchmark by US dollars 11 per barrel from US dollars 62 per barrel to US dollars 73 per barrel. B, a reduction in the projected oil production volume by 283,000 barrels per day from 1.883 million barrels per day to 1.6 million barrels per day. C, an increase in the estimated provision for PMS subsidy for 2022 by 3.557 trillion naira from 442.72 billion naira to 4 trillion naira. D, a cut in the provision for federally funded upstream projects being implemented by 200 billion naira from 352.8 billion naira to 152.80 billion naira. E, an increase in the projection for federal government independent revenue by 400 billion naira. And F, an additional provision of 182.45 billion naira to cater for the needs of the Nigerian Police Force. Based on the above adjustments, the Federation account main pool revenue for the three tiers of government is projected to decline by 2.418 trillion naira, while federal government share from the account net of transfer to the Federal Capital Territory and other statutory deductions is projected to reduce by 1.173 trillion naira. However, the amount available to fund the federal government budget is projected to decline by 772.91 billion naira due to the increase in the projection for independent revenue operating surplus remittance by 400 billion naira. Aggregate expenditure is projected to increase by 192.52 billion naira due to increase in personnel cost by 161.4 billion naira and other service-wide votes by 21.05 billion naira, both for the Nigeria Police Force, additional domestic debt service provision of 76.13 billion naira, and net reductions in statutory transfers by 66.07 billion naira as follows. A, NDDC by 13.46 billion naira from 102.78 billion naira to 89.32 billion naira. B, NEDC by 6.30 billion naira from 48.08 billion naira to 41.78 billion naira. C, UBEC by 23.16 billion naira from 112.29 billion naira to 89.13 billion naira. D, Basic Health Care Fund by 11.58 billion naira from 56.14 billion naira to 44.56 billion naira. And E, NASENI by 11.58 billion naira from 56.14 billion naira to 44.56 billion naira. Total budget deficit is projected to increase by 965.42 billion naira to 7.35 trillion naira, representing 3.99% of GDP. The incremental deficit will be financed by new borrowings from the domestic market. Given the urgency of the request for revision of the 2022 fiscal framework and the 2022 budget amendments, I seek the cooperation of the National Assembly for expeditious legislative action on this request. Please accept, distinguished Senate President, the assurances of my highest consideration. Yours sincerely, Muhammadu Buhari. Distinguished colleagues, this is the letter from Mr. President, and we recall that we had received the request to amend the 2022 Appropriation Act. Our Committee on Appropriation in the Senate and that of the House have been working assiduously to ensure that we consider the report by tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, before we go on the Easter recess, to enable the executive implement the 2022 appropriation.